Hello and welcome to webinar 2 of our series in partnership with CIPR Health. I'm Sally, 1/3 of Team Unplugged, and we're really grateful to our sponsors CIPR Health for helping us to get this series of webinars off the ground. They've been fantastic. I've had really good feedback on the first one. So this second one, Darren will tell you a little bit more about what we had, and Georgia as well in a minute. We had loads of interaction. In the feedback from the first one, people really loved the polls. They love the interaction, the Q&A, so we made sure we had plenty of that, and we'll have lots more of that in webinar 3 too. So just going to hand over to Darren to tell you a little bit about who we had on for webinar 2.
Thank you, Sally. Yes, well, we had a star-studded cast, didn't we? So in terms of our professional learning sessions, the first topic we covered was crisis comms and recovery, and we had a panel of 3, which was Julie Odens, who's Assistant Director of Communications and Customer at Derbyshire County Council. We had Donna Jordan, who's Strategic Head of Communications at Derbyshire Constabulary. And the third member was Amanda Coleman, who's a Crisis Communications Consultant. So really talented and kind of experienced trio there who've all gone through various different crises themselves in their day jobs. And we had a really great interactive session and lots of questions flooding in for those 3. Following that, we had Jenny Field, who is a business communications strategist, and as you all know, the CIPR president this year. So I was really pleased to get Jenny onto the webinar too. And really, Jenny was sharing some really timely tips and advice, resources in terms of books, podcasts, places to go and get your learning and development from, whether that be, traditional classroom style, or, actually there's a lot of stuff and a lot of content and suggestions around some of the less obvious learning. And again, lots of questions for Jenny and a really engaged session there we had.
And Georgia, do you want to tell us a little bit about our lovely wellbeing sessions, particularly pertinent for you that night, actually?
It was very pertinent for me that night, because after almost lost track of how many weeks of the pressure of working in lockdown for a large local authority, I kind of collapsed a little bit, really. So I wasn't participating in the webinar, which I was left to the last minute, really, before I pulled out, because I thought, God, if I can't do Comms Unplugged stuff, I must be ill if I really can't motivate myself to take part in that. But I was sitting on the line and enjoying listening to all the things that were going on in the webinar. And I did just about manage to participate in the wellbeing activities from the comfort of my snuggled down position in bed that evening. So the first one, of course, being a wonderful arena with yoga. If you're watching back the webinar, do take part in the yoga, because she really focuses on the kind of things that we need when we're sat there looking at a screen all day. Some work with the eyes, which you wouldn't necessarily expect for yoga, which I found really relaxing, really calming, really enjoyable. So do take part in that. And she's a firm favourite in the field now, and setting out to be a firm favourite on the webinars too, which is great. And then our concluding wellbeing session was with the lovely Jo Crossland, comms extraordinaire pro by day, and I would say by night, but it's actually probably by any opportunity he ever gets, to be nature buff, and in particular RSPB volunteer and bird enthusiast and specialist. And he took us through some brilliant little tips for identifying the bird song that we are all noticing so much more with the absence of plane noise, traffic noise, that kind of thing through lockdown. So do stay on the webinar right to the end, because it's absolutely fantastic, really enjoyable, and you'll learn something, some great tips for recognising the bird song that you hear when you're out on your walks or in your garden or whatever. So enjoy.
I'm going to hand over to Sally, because first up we've got our yoga slot. So anyone that's ever been to Comms Unplugged before will know that we have yoga in the marquee. And so obviously, I don't know about you or anybody else that's listening in tonight, but I've been sat at my desk all day working today, like actual work at my desk at home. And I've got a little bit of shoulder ache, and I think perhaps my posture's not great. So I think our resident yoga instructor, Irene, has got some top tips to how to counter that. So Sally, over to you.
She has. So normally Georgia would introduce Irina, because Irina is Georgia's yoga instructor, and she's been with us since year one, 2017 at Comms Unplugged, and she's fantastic, and she's done a couple of little videos for us. We did one last time and we're doing one this time, and really to try and focus on those of us who are kind of all sat at home, you know, kind of all tensing up, and she's got some very specific stuff to help us with that. Georgia commented earlier on in our messaging that that Irina, the tree on Irina's t-shirt today is very much like the Comms Unplugged tree, which stands proud in the middle of our field, which we hope, against hope, we will be able to see again in September. So if you give me just a moment, I will stop my video and then I will play the yoga video. What you'll need is to be sat, it's a sitting yoga session. Just sit in your chair and follow along with Irina. So.
Good evening, Unpluggers, and welcome to our little 5-minute yoga session today. I hope this video finds you healthy and safe and well. So just come to a nice comfortable seated position, grounding your feet into the floor, sitting up tall, lifting the chest and the heart, rolling the shoulders back and down. Nice smooth brow. Nice soft jaw, slightly bringing the chin in, okay? So we're going to inhale, reach up, exhale, namaste. Let's do that again. Inhaling, reaching up. Now exhale, bring the chin in. We're going to fold forward and down. Come all the way down as far as you comfortably can. And if you can, the hands come down. You might want to take the back of the hands to the floor. Chin right in. Continue to breathe. Shake the head yes. Shake the head no. Sinking forward. Soft, soft breath. Reaching out the palms. Spread the fingers. Turn the palms to face each other. And inhale, come up. Away with the fingers as we come down. And again, give those shoulders a nice roll, tucking them into those imaginary back pockets at the back of the head. I'm going to take the arms up here, inhaling, cross one over the other, and take them down there. Okay? So then really open the armpits, take the elbows back. Now the hand that's on the top, the left hand, bring that up. And then if you can, ease the right hand down in between the shoulder blades. As much as you comfortably can, pushing with that hand. Keeping buttocks firm to the chair, draw the left elbow back, inhale, and go over to the left side. Look up to the right slightly, relaxing the shoulders, continuing to breathe gently and softly. Back to centre. Let's change hands, so left first, right second, open, lift, armpits, smile, and then take the right one up, ease it over, pushing it into the back a little more if you wish. Let's go over to the right, look gently up to the left, draw the right elbow back, breathing into the side chest here. Back to centre. And down and roll those shoulders. Sit up nice and tall. Inhale. Exhale, turn to the right. Go as far as you can. It's comfortable for you, and then you look down that left armpit. Inhale, hunch the shoulders. Exhale, relaxing them down, down, down. Continue to breathe. Let's gently bring that chin to the chest, to the centre. Inhale, hunch. Exhale, relax. Bring the head to neutral. Inhale. Exhale, let's go to the left as far as you comfortably can. And then when you get there, let's look down that left armpit. Inhale, hunch. Exhale, relax. Sinking, breathing. And now again, last time, roll chin to chest. Inhale, hunch. Exhale, relax. Bring the head to neutral. We're just going to interlace the hands at the widest part of the hair when we come up, looking up, elbows back, big smile, inhaling. And then just closing in on the exhale. Sinking forward, a little pressure. Back to centre. Let's roll out, roll out. So we're going to look now very gently, keeping the head still, just moving through the eyes. We're going to take the eyes up to the far right corner and hold them there and just blink very quickly, 5 or 6 times. Close the eyes, bring the pupils back to the centre. Soften shoulders, open the eyes, look up to the far right, as far as you can. Blinking a few times, 5 or 6 times. Close. Hold the eyeballs back to centre. Just give the hands a little rub together and just place your fingertips on your eyelids. Now imagine that there's a soft stream of refreshing water coming from the fingertips and gently cleansing the eyes. Soft breathing. Now take your fingertips to your temples. You might just want to give your temples a little massage. Come down to the jawline. Give the jawline a little massage. And let's bring the palms back to namaste. Just take a moment just to centre. Take a breath. And let's try and send the entire planet peace.
Fantastic. Are we all refreshed?
Yeah, that was good. I could really feel the back cracking there, actually. Not good.
My eyes are cleansed.
That's good. That needed to happen, Darren, didn't it?
It did, yeah. Well, everything needs cleansing, really, but let's not go there. Yes, let's move on quickly. So, excellent, really enjoyed that. So our first session in terms of professional development, as I say, really pleased that we've got Jenny Field, CIPR President and Business Communications Strategist in the house tonight. So Jenny's going to talk to us about keeping up our learning and development. This is a really unusual time, isn't it? And I know for many people, they've really gone to town and they've been filling their boots really in terms of learning and development. For others, some of you working in-house, you've been so busy that you've maybe not had the time to go and do some of the things that you would have normally done. So I think Jenny's going to talk to us and give us some top tips in her role with her CIPR hat on. So hi Jenny, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, so thank you for joining us this evening. And yeah, really keen what you've got to say really in terms of your top tips for learning and development and continual learning during this really strange period that we're all going through.
I know it is, and I think it's such a topic actually, the whole learning and development piece over the lockdown period, because everyone's in such different places and people can feel quite a lot of pressure to do loads of learning and development, and people are very busy as well, so they're finding that really hard and feeling a little bit of shame of not having the time. So there's lots going on around learning and development. But one of the questions I wanted to ask, and I know that Sally's got a lovely poll for you, is around whether or not you are doing any continuous professional development at the moment. And what I want to talk about, and we've got time in the Q&A, is to really look at what you guys consider to be professional development, because I think sometimes we can get a little bit stuck in thinking that it's having to do a qualification or having to do chartered assessment or having to do a day's workshop, whereas actually there's lots of different ways to learn and develop professionally, and it's important to look at all of those different aspects. So really interested to know if you are doing any learning, if you've got the time, but also really wanted to talk to you a little bit about the need to edit your choices. And if you've ever heard me speak before, you'll often hear me reference the book by Matt Haig called Notes on a Nervous Planet, which I'm quite a big fan of, because the first chapter, I think it is, he talks about the fact that we need to edit our choices, in that we can't watch every film, we can't read every book. And I think what's interesting is this pressure that we constantly feel to be doing everything. And his language around editing your choices for me was really helpful, as someone that this year is running a business, being a CIPR president and writing a book. There's a lot of things to do in a year. Some of them were not so good ideas, but they are also things that have required me to edit my choices around the things that I want to do. So the name of the book, Ruth, is Notes on a Nervous Planet. It's by Matt Haig. It's really good. Talks about a lot to do with his anxiety and mental health, and the editing your choices there is really important. So what I would encourage you to do when it comes to your learning and development is to have a plan. So when I did my chartered assessment a few years ago, one of the things that we had to do was a 2-year plan around your professional development linked to competencies. And it was one of the best things I did. And I've carried it forward since doing that, because it's allowed me to be really intentional about what I do. And that's really important for us, because we can get lost in all the pressure to do lots of things, the pressure from society to be keeping up to date with this trend, that trend. You know, PR and communications is very broad. And I think being able to think about the things that you want to learn and develop around is really important. So personally, for me, I have some around public affairs. It's an area I'm not particularly strong in, and I want to learn more. So I spend a bit of time trying to network with people in that space. I also want to do more to understand communications in different cultures and countries. So I do quite a lot with the IABC. They've just had their World Conference, and I should be with them in Chicago, but I'm here with you guys instead. But it's trying to do things that are intentional to help me develop. So that's really important to have a think about. The other thing is to think about the skills that you need in the broader context of our industry. So what I come back to again and again is the fact that the skills that we need don't really change. And it's interesting, I've been involved with CIPR for a very long time, and we'll often do surveys to find out what our members need, and then we adapt and change our offering to support that. And I remember when we launched a finance course, because we knew that business acumen was something that people were struggling with. It was a skills gap identified in our annual survey. So we launched a training course on that, and no one did it. So we don't offer it anymore as a training course. And it's really interesting. It's interesting from a human behavior perspective. We often say that we want to do something, but we don't. When I used to work for a travel retail company, we used to survey people about what food they wanted in a train station. They'd all say they want a salad. So we'd create a concept around that, and actually they all wanted Burger King. So we all say the things that we think people want to hear. So it's really interesting when we look at the skills, what are the real skills that we need? And when you look at the skills that people are talking about now, a lot of that is around organizations with purpose and being able to articulate a purpose, but also being able to be authentic, and also looking at AI and technology and moving away from social media, but understanding digital. So these are all the same kind of skills that we've been talking about for a long time. But what I'm really looking for is for people to be more intentional about that development and think about the things that are the gaps, and then making the time to do those. Because it's really easy to not make the time to do it. We can all talk about being busy, and it's a complete myth. And there's another book which I often refer to, which is called Busy, by a guy called Tony Crabb. And he talks about the fact that you're not busy, you're just prioritizing different things. So that's a really important thing when you're looking at your learning and development, you're looking at what's important to you, is around what are the areas that you want to focus on. Because we can all be busy, but I can waste a lot of time playing Candy Crush or on Instagram, and it can be a vortex of doom, as I often call it. So I'll set myself timers and, you know, really geeky things like that, but it helps me make sure that I'm focused on the things that are going to help me learn and develop. And whilst your professional development is really important, I can't come to a Comms Unplugged event and not talk about your own personal well-being and your own personal development, because that's really important for you. And it's finding the right things for you that are going to help you have balance and find the right things that are going to help you perform at your best. And they will be different things for different people. So I have friends that can't get on with meditation but have tried it, but they love weightlifting, and that's their space for chilling out. I'm a big yoga fan. I invested in some essential oils this year to help me stay calm during my moments of rage and frustration that inevitably happen when you're trying to do too many things. But it's finding the right things for you that are going to help you grow and develop as a more rounded individual, and not just about your professional development. So if you're going to look at doing a plan and some kind of 2-year plan, then I'd look at what's important around your competencies and around your professional development, but also look at what you want to do that's for you, because it's your oxygen mask first here, and that doesn't change whether we're in crisis or not, and we have to look after ourselves. So making sure that you're taking time to develop yourself in different ways, whether that's learning to cook, learning a language. I was not joking, I was telling the guys when we did our prep call for this that I was learning to play the didgeridoo that I bought years ago from Australia, and I can just about do one note, and I'm not going to give it a try on here. But I wanted to learn something that was different. I learned sign language last year because I wanted to be able to be more accessible to people that I knew would struggle to understand me when I was talking. So there's so much that we can do to develop and learn that doesn't always have to be around, you know, a workshop, a PR course or a comms course. Look broader than that. There's just so much out there. And then the only final thing I was going to mention was a couple of recommendations. So there's a couple of questions around that. But the other few things I wanted to mention that I have found particularly helpful is a book called The Science of Fear by Dan Gardner. I blogged about the key points from that book. If in editing your choices, you don't want to read it, but want to read the highlights, then let me know and I'll ping you the link. But it was a really good book about understanding how our brains respond to fear and understanding the science behind what goes on in there. And the other one is a podcast, which is called Unlocking Us, which is by Brené Brown, who I'm a huge fan of. And she's been doing a podcast, I think, which she launched just before lockdown and was planning to launch it regardless of it. But the 3rd episode, I want to say, is around grief and loss. And it's incredibly powerful. Whether you've lost somebody or not, it's not necessarily about that. But I must have listened to that podcast about 4 times, and I've recommended it to several people. It's a phenomenal episode, that one. But there's loads on there, and I'm gradually getting through it. So a couple of recommendations in there, both from a personal and professional development, but all important for me to kind of just smoosh it all together as one in some ways, because I am one person and I don't have that line between work and home. So that's kind of my take on learning development skills and what's going on. And I'm very happy to have some questions and try and make it a bit more interactive. I know that's what you guys like. So anything coming in, Sally?
Hi, Jenny. Thanks very much for that. Can I just, before we start taking any questions, I'll just give you, I'll just end the polling and I'll give you the result. I'll share the results of that poll.
Amazing.
So hopefully you can see that 82% of people on the call are doing some development, which is fantastic.
Amazing. That's way more than I thought it was going to be, and I think it's testament to what we can do. And I think once you work out where you want to spend your time, it's just setting those timers. I find it really helpful. I try and do at least 15 minutes of reading without the pressure of I've got to read a whole book. Just break it down into chunks.
Yeah, absolutely. And now Katrina has raised her hand. So Katrina, hopefully you can jot something down in the chat. I can't see that you have or put a question in. Do you want to put your question into the chat? Darren, are you going to manage the chat? You're going to come back on?
It's coming to the, we've got a Q&A.
Yep.
From Kat, which says, how do we make our plan for CPD flexible and adaptable, especially as a freelancer? Fabulous question. So I break mine into 90-day blocks. So generally I have a 90-day plan that, as someone that is kind of freelancer, run my own consultancy, I have a 90-day plan that's split into my marketing and sales plan for my business, my personal development, and legacy and impact, I think we do, which sounds a bit strange, so you don't need to do that one. But if you've got one that's kind of a work and then a learning and development, and break it into 90 days, it means that you're only focusing on those things, and that just makes it a bit easier and also more realistic around what you can achieve, so that you're not getting stuck in having to do loads of stuff and feeling like you've got to do it all at once. So I would do 90-day plans. At the moment, 90 days might feel a bit too long, especially with the amount of uncertainty we've got. So maybe doing 30 days or maybe doing just weekly might actually be better. Sometimes I break it down of, I'm just going to try and get 2 chapters done this week of reading, and that's it. You know, just set realistic goals. Don't be hard on yourself. But if you're editing your choices and being intentional, then that makes it a lot easier for you to make sure that you're spending time on the things that are important to you and not getting stuck in an Instagram /Candy Crush vortex.
And I think I also saw on the comments earlier on somebody saying they get a bit overwhelmed by the amount of CPD that they could or should be doing, or, you know, and that can be a bit much, can't it? And then you don't really know where to start.
Exactly. And there is so much you can do. I mean, there's webinars. I mean, there's so much, especially at the moment with everyone doing so much free content online, which is amazing. And then you can feel this guilt of not being somewhere. But it's about doing what you can do and at the right time for you. There's a lot of content that stays there for a long time. So that's really important, especially with things like the IABC World Conference that's been this week. I've watched one keynote and one thing about listening, and that's it. So I'm going to save the rest and watch them next weekend when I've got time. And it's just getting myself comfortable with that. Yeah, but I'm missing out on all the chat and people talking about it. But that's fine, because actually I need to be doing other things this week, and I've got friends' birthdays and things at the weekend. Then that's important to have social connection. So I'm going to do it much later on.
Okay, so we've got a question from Martin Gray. 3 top thought leaders that you're following right at the moment.
Oh, okay. So Brene Brown, who I've already mentioned. I mean, I just adore everything
she's
that
fabulous.
She does. I just love
fabulous.
her. So,
yeah.
So I talk about her a lot. I think she's great. I'm also following Jamila Jamil on Instagram. So you may or may not be familiar with her. She's a big activist in both the race and feminist movement. And calling out brands and calling out influencers. And from a comms and PR perspective, I really applaud the work that she's doing. Yes, she's done the I Weigh movement. Thank you, Sarah. I just really applaud her, and I think she's excellent. And then as a third one, I mean, I always come back a little bit to Simon Sinek, because I really enjoy his work around purpose and why, and his work that he did around millennials and some of those things. And so they're probably the people that I tend to follow and track what they're up to.
Yes, fab, thank you. Yes, so, and we've also got, could you share, this is from Emma, could you share top 3 tips on how to motivate your teams if they genuinely aren't interested in development?
Okay, so that isn't true. They're just not interested in a certain kind of development. So if you go to intrinsic motivation theory, we need autonomy, mastery, and purpose in order to feel fulfilled as an individual. So they will need to be mastering something. It's just trying to unlock what that might be. They will always come back to, I just want to be paid more. That's a whole other conversation. But it's about finding what they want to be really good at and what areas they're interested in. If I look back at my career, which has spanned about 16 years, I would never have thought I would be reading books about neuroscience, the science of fear, behavioural insights, all that stuff. And that's really opened up a path for me that I'm really interested in. So I think it's looking at the breadth and which bits might be of interest. And maybe just get them a coach or something like that, or a mentor that can help them explore which parts they want to learn, because that might be helpful. Just having a mentoring chat and a conversation can often be enough to start to unlock things. I know from a lady I've mentored for a long time, she's just started her journey on diversity and inclusion to be really vocal about that. She has been internally, she's now bringing external, and we've never talked about that until probably about 18 months ago, and now it's become a real passion point for her. So it's just having those conversations to unlock it.
Fantastic. Okay, so we've got another question here from Catherine Richards over in Wales. Any tips on influencing upwards?
Oh, loads. It's a whole other session.
that is a whole other session, actually. Let's write that down for a future one.
Yeah, it's a whole. I mean, I talked about it on a webinar the other week, and I did a blog post on that as well. So I'm really happy to share the link with some tips in there. It is a whole other session. I know there's lots more to come tonight, so I don't want to hijack too much, but I'm happy to share the link as a starter and have a chat outside of this. Absolutely fine.
That would be great. Thanks, Jenny. I do just want to share the results of the first poll, actually, which we haven't seen yet, because obviously you quite rightly talked about health and well-being as being part of your personal development. And as you know, we very, very strongly believe that. So I'm going to share those results now. And so this is the bit about health and wellbeing and how seriously it's been taken in our organisations particularly during COVID-19. So we've got actually not bad, well, polarised, really polarised actually.
Yeah.
So integral from the start and including planning, 40% of people, but then not involved at all, a third of people. So that's quite telling, isn't it, actually, in terms of you know, how we as comms people are integrated into the organisation and getting involved in that stuff. How important has it been to communicate about the support available? 67% obviously high on that, which is, you know, because we've got to keep ourselves going, haven't we? Quite apart from the professional skills, keeping ourselves going and keeping ourselves, you know, giving our energy up has been difficult. And what's helped to boost morale? So thank yous and recognition from senior leaders. So there's a bit of a pattern coming here. How do we influence upwards? How do we get the recognition we need from senior leaders? So that's clearly something I think people would like to discuss on a future panel, which I think we'll bring in, which is interesting. So I'll stop sharing those results now. Any more questions? Let's have a look.
I will, and there's been a few things in the chat for like links and different stuff like that. So I'm not going anywhere. So I will answer things and pop links and do all that stuff in the chat. So very happy to share bits and bobs in there. So
fantastic. Okay, so we've got. Well, I think we're done on the questions now in the Q&A, but yeah, if anybody wants to ask me more questions of Jenny, then do pop them in the Q&A or in the chat, and she will be here for the rest of the session and be able to answer those. So that's fantastic. Darren, where's our MC? Come back.
I'm making notes and listening. There is just one more question I spotted from Carol. Question for Jenny. Any feedback on how the CIPR mentoring scheme is going?
Yeah, really well, actually. For those that don't know, this was launched very timely during lockdown, and it's been on the plan driven by Laura Sutherland, who's one of our volunteers, and it's matching people that are fellows with more junior people or people that are non-fellows, and it's going very well. In fact, I've just got my team signed up, and the first few people she contacted were already full, so that's a really good sign. But it's early days, but I think it's a huge member benefit for me to be able to have a free mentoring scheme as a member. I think is invaluable to a lot of people, and especially at the moment really helpful. So and Dan Holden's just saying there that he really recommends it, had his first session this week. So yeah, it's going well, but no hard data, I'm afraid, but I'll try and get some.
Brilliant, that's really helpful. Thanks, Jenny. We got time for one more quick question, Sally?
I think so, if you want to put your video on, Darren, because I don't like talking to you in a black space like that. It makes me feel...
I look better this way. From Catherine Richards, again for Jenny, any top tips on influencing upwards?
Oh, we had that one already.
Oh, we had that one, and I said that's a whole other talk, but I'll link to my blog that I wrote about it. Come on, Darren, pay attention.
He's so busy listening to... listening to the chat.
We'll cover that another time. Sounds like the subject for perhaps a blog post as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, I'll put my video back on then. So,
right, I will leave you now, but I will be here in the background and in the chat. So thank you very much for listening, everybody.
That was super helpful. Thanks very much for taking part in that, Jenny. And yeah, I hope you can stick around and enjoy the rest of the webinar. So look at this, Sally. We're almost on time as well. This is
amazing. Amazing.
So our next session, we've got a panel discussion, crisis and recovery comms. So again, don't forget, type your questions in either to the Q&A or into the chat boxes, and we'll make sure we get your questions to our very illustrious panel. So we've genuinely got a really talented and experienced panel in this area. We've got Julie Odens, who's Assistant Director of Communications and Customers at Derbyshire County Council, in her very retro, very original 70s top.
It's very cool, isn't it? But very hot and sweaty as well.
Very cool, I do like that. We have Donna Jordan, who's Strategic Head of Communications and Engagement at Derbyshire Constabulary.
Good evening, everybody. Currently on maternity leave.
And a very new mom. So
Yep.
How's the little one? Is he asleep?
He's asleep downstairs with Daddy watching football.
Wow, well trained.
Yeah.
Excellent. And we have Amanda Coleman, who's Crisis Comms Consultant, an author of the very excellent book I'm currently reading. Quick plug for Amanda. No, I'm not on commission. Crisis Comms Strategies. We'll put actually the details of your book, Amanda, into the chat box, because genuinely, think it's a really good read and a really helpful new resource that I'm sure people on the webinar will be keen on. So we'll share the details of that. So what we've got now is a couple of minutes really for each of you to share a few thoughts. I mean, this is a hugely complex topic, and you know, you could probably all talk for hours on this one, but just a quick couple of minutes of your kind of headline thoughts on the topic, and then we'll start delving into the issues we've got currently. There's all sorts of discussion, isn't there, over are we even in recovery yet? You know, for many, no, we're still in crisis. You know, unfortunately, another 190 odd people have died in the past 24 hours. That doesn't sound like recovery, does it? But clearly we do need to take a look forward about recovery. It will look different for different people at different stages. We're all going to be in slightly different situations within our organisations. So how can we carry on coping with what's a crisis like no other? But how can we begin to plan for what comes next as well? So perhaps Julie, if we can start off with you and a few of your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I kind of made some quick notes which have come down to sort of 5 main points, I think. And I think a really key one is actually you, as communicators, we need to be looking after the well-being of our communities. I think the voice of your residents and the people that you serve can be quite lost at the moment while people are really busy and trying to get everything done and just got to get things done now. And as comms people, we can really be that voice and that knowing that well-being and keeping that at the heart of what we do. I think secondly, our audiences have really always been very diverse, but there's a real spectrum of opinion, even within a small audience at the moment, from people who believe this whole situation is a massive fuss that we shouldn't be worrying about, to those who are really afraid and really frightened. And it's understanding that as much as you can and responding to that, even if that means responding lots of times in different ways to different groups. I think thirdly, I think the fundamentals of comms and recovery comms haven't changed, even though this is a new situation that none of us have ever dealt with. So to my mind, recovery comes down really to reassurance about the present and the future, and where we are, and being that trusted voice, giving people resources, and that's a trusted voice and good information coming out. I think that's tough at the moment because we're all dealing with announcements that we don't get before the public does, and we have to try and catch up. But there's a real space for a trusted voice, and that, I think, is my 4th point. And just because you don't always get loads of engagement and loads of feedback from your comms activity doesn't mean you're not that trusted voice, because you are now. We've seen massive increases on our channels, 150% increase on our social media engagement rate in the last 3 months, a 40% increase in the number of inquiries we're getting through social, 4.2 million visits to our web pages in the last 3 months alone, and nearly 500,000 of those were to specific coronavirus pages, and 112% increase in the opening of emails. People want us now. We've always been there, and we've been building that reputation and that trust, and when they need us, this is when they're coming to us. So I think remember that. And the kind of final point, which is a bit of a reassurance, and I found this really helpful when I realised it, was what the people you're talking to, your audience, care about isn't necessarily what the press are asking you about. And we've had inquiries, regional, national, international, from the press around care home cases, testing numbers, and financial impact. But actually, when we look at what our residents in Derbyshire are engaging with us on, it's actually about use of the countryside and country parks. It's tips, 2,078% increase in the visit to the web pages about tips, amazingly, and schools. And that's very different to what the press are asking us about. And it's just, I think, keeping your focus in the right place, as hard as that is at the moment, is really, really useful.
That's fantastic, Julie, and some really impressive increases, and I love the stats, but some really impressive increases in, the level of interest, the engagement through social, through web, through email. you know, as with everybody else in public sector comms, NHS, police, I think just thank you for what you're doing in local government. Genuinely, you know, I see it as a resident. I appreciate it, and it's great to see. And be interesting, won't it, what impact all of that has on kind of trust surveys and how trusted local government is. I would suspect more so than before.
You'd hope so, yeah.
So, brilliant. Thanks ever so much for that, Julie. We'll come back to you in a moment. So, hi, Donna, and over to you. And yeah, just your kind of headline thoughts really on this one.
Well, I think the main thing being is, you know, it's about accepting what is a new normal. And, you know, obviously a lot of people working from home now, it's completely different ways of working from an internal perspective. So obviously, aside from what Julie's talked about there, where local really does matter, I think there's a real aspect here of making sure that people are actually looking after themselves. If people are managers, making sure that they're looking after their teams. How do people actually debrief? How do they actually deal with the severe stress that comes with that? How do people actually understand their own stress indicators and understanding how it's affecting you personally? So not only is it a case of learning from what's happened around debriefs and sort of talking it out amongst your teams, but how do you actually go home? Is it a case of going home and having a glass of wine to actually unwind, talking to partners, friends, colleagues, to actually really sort of understand the pressures that you're under? It's a really, really crazy time for everybody at the moment, and everybody's working ridiculous hours. And it's one of those where, again, I know Jenny talked about the oxygen mask analogy, but it's really, really important that obviously you do look after yourself, because if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after other people. And I think that for me is a really big thing, where recognising where it has actually taken its toll on you, making sure that you do take time out when you can, because that has a massive impact. I mean, when we were dealing with Whaley Bridge in Derbyshire, it was really, really long days, 16-hour days at times. And it's making sure that both yourself, you're in a good frame of mind to actually do the best that you can, but also making sure that you're looking after your team. So I think that well-being side of things is something that's really, really important.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. Thank you, Donna. And finally, over to Amanda. So Amanda, obviously you've got the in-house experience, but you've now also got the comms consultants experience as well. So yeah, just your kind of headline thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think this is when it gets way more complicated, and if people are feeling unsettled, it's because it is more confusing, it's more complicated, and there's more to manage. Top for me is we're not in recovery. I could give you a long spiel about why we're not in recovery, and there's a load of stuff that's in the book around it, but we're not. We're in what I keep calling mid-crisis pre-recovery, which is a phase that you probably don't get with a lot of other incidents because of the speed with which they move. The key bit for me around this is that everybody's experience of the crisis has been slightly different. Every business's and organisation's experience has been slightly different, and everybody's move to recovery will be slightly different. So one of the concerns for me is that people will be looking and thinking, oh, they're moving ahead like that, I need to do the same. Not always the case, probably not the case. It's going to be around your organisation and perceptions, mood, tone, etc., and understanding that. And I think in this, and it was something that was critical after the Manchester Arena attack, was that people outside the organisation were nowhere near ready to start thinking and feeling and being in a recovery state, even though the organisation was. So you've got that kind of juxtaposition of you'll be moving to planning and getting things in place and looking at what you're doing inside, but that's not what people want projected, because they're still in the middle of crisis and still feeling the crisis. It is a marathon, not a sprint, and I have said from day one with this, and people probably heard me say other things, I get concerned about the amount of exhausted energy and exhausted people we've got, on the basis that they were running full pelt and have tried to keep that up, and we're not in a position where you just can't do that. Like Donna said, you get burned out so quickly. So it's a bit about looking at personal resilience in whatever form that needs to be. And then I can bore for England, I think, about how crisis and recovery comes. But there's 4 elements for me around recovery that you need to be thinking through, and it goes outside of comms, because it's a bit like with the poll before. It's around the involvement you've got with the organisational recovery, because that's got to be critical. So reviewing, looking at rebuilding, looking at what was the organisation like before, because things that you were dealing with before haven't gone away. They're still sort of lurking in the background if you've got, you know, problems, or if you've got things that are happening. Resourcing, which we could talk about endlessly, and then ultimately you need to start looking at re-establishing what the future is going to look like, and managing the uncertainty in the best way you can. And it's not easy, and everybody is going to feel this slightly differently, but it's just being comfortable with that, and being, you know, and understanding that even though you're all doing comms, we're all doing comms in different ways. We're not always going to be in exactly the same place like we were right back at the start. And I'll stop talking now because I'll go on forever.
You could write a book on this, couldn't you?
Funny that, yeah, good.
Have I mentioned Amanda's book?
Stop it.
Really good book. We'll share the link. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's so much to delve into there, isn't there? I'm just going to take a quick look at questions we've got coming in from our participants.
Hang on a minute, Darren. I'm just going to remind you that I'm going to launch the poll now around recovery comms at the same time, so people can be answering that too. So that should be coming at you right now.
Excellent, thanks, Sally. So yeah, if everybody can have a go at that poll while we're continuing to chat. Question in from Katie Barton. Hi, Katie. Quite often leaders know they need to do recovery, but I've seen that when operational parts of the business have recovered and go back to normal, comms are still usually in recovery mode and stay there for much longer. How can we keep the whole business with us in comms and keep recovering business-wide? Anybody fancy that one?
I'll start. I think, yeah, I will shut up. I think it's about mapping it out and planning it. And there's a bit around trying to, in the way, if you're talking about the workforce, it's about trying to understand and deal with the workforce in the way that you would do externally, because different people are a bit at different places, and it's almost like charting it even on a, you know, I get quite interested in grids now, you know, in statistics. Darren, I like grids where people are, who are the interested people, who are the people who are concerned, and map it out so that you can start then to plan the activity to suit that. But it's got to be a phased approach. You can't rush at this. There's no point trying to speed towards recovery. I do get a bit concerned that the government are trying to push to recovery in their narrative when people aren't at that place. So it goes at its own pace, and try not to rush too far ahead.
Yeah, really, really helpful. Thanks, Amanda. Julie or Donna, any thoughts you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think I suppose there will be probably some areas in a complex organisation that does a lot of things that haven't had the level of effect of the crisis that some areas have had, and those areas that have been less affected will be, and I see it in my organisation, they just want to get back to normal. They want to get back to doing their normal job. They've not been at that front line of response, and I think it's understanding that and understanding why that is, but then understanding whether is it just those internal staff that want to do that, or do your audiences, do your residents want that as well? Because if the push is from outside, then maybe we need to respond to that. If it is just people internally wanting to push on with something, as Amanda said, that isn't time to push on with, you've got to be using that evidence to go, no, people aren't engaged, you know, stick a bit of test stuff out, people aren't engaging with it, they're not ready, we need to be doing something else.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Julie. We've actually got a question coming directly for Donna, so perhaps Donna, I'll jump straight to this next question if that's okay. This is from Super Cat Marshall. Hi to Cat.
Hi, Cat.
Donna, could you expand more on being aware of stress triggers in terms of learning and coming out of this crisis? Self-awareness is one of the first things that goes by the wayside when we as comms are looking after everything else. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me, it is around understanding when enough is enough with yourself. So, you know, it's things like lack of sleep, it's things like you're constantly churning work in your mind, you're not actually ever having any downtime. And it's really, really important that you actually can recognise that in yourself. when you need to take that time out and actually sort of get that break from work, actually, whether it be go out and do some exercise, go and clear your head. Because if you're sort of constantly operating and constantly thinking about things where it's work related, you're not getting that clear focus that allows you to then recover yourself. So it is about that personal recovery, but only you can understand what those triggers are in yourself. So like I say, lack of sleep, it could be, you know, you're sort of getting headaches, it could be that you know, you sort of, it's one of those where when your mind is so busy that you can't see the wood for the trees. And I think that's the thing, really. It's identifying that in yourself.
Yeah, really good points. I think, you know, it's ironic, isn't it, because we're doing online stuff after work, aren't we, tonight? But I did a poll on the Comms 2.0 Twitter today about video calls, because I think for me, video has been a real lifeline during lockdown for us to keep in touch with work and with friends, etc., etc. But a chat that came out on the Comms Unplugged WhatsApp groups yesterday just suddenly emerged that actually people are still having a huge volume of video calls every day. And so the fear is that, you know, in comms teams, you're all hugely busy at the best of times, but throw a global pandemic into the mix and 5 or 6 video calls on top. So when do you actually get the headspace and the time to sit and do the work? Never mind some of the creative stuff. So the Twitter poll, there's about 200 people voted so far, but the numbers are: how many video calls are you averaging a day? 4%, only just 4% said 0. 1 or 2 video calls a day were 33%. The top score was 3 to 4 video calls a day. That was 41%. And for the remainder, 22%, they're having 5 or more video calls a day. So kind of touches on Amanda's point, doesn't it, about how do you do everything else on top of that? Because it's a great facility and great tech, but it's also a huge distraction. And I suppose just a quick top tip really about how you three would manage that personally. How do you cope with that?
Can I pop in with the results on the poll, because obviously that's come up a little bit in the poll as well, hasn't it? So I'm going to share the results now. So you should be able to see that, whether people are willing to challenge and push back at the organisation if they think you're trying to move to recovery too soon. That's great. So people do feel empowered to do that, which is brilliant. How professionally confident have you felt during the pandemic? I think we've recognised that in some of what people have said just now. Occasional wobbles, but generally okay. I definitely recognise that. It's definitely me, if I were allowed to answer the poll. And then this bit about how you're winding down. Yeah, so exercise, walking, something active. Still quite a few people, worryingly about a quarter of people saying winding down, what's that? You know, that and that is worrying for our people in our industry, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. And I think that goes back to exactly what I'm saying about people making sure that they're taking the time to actually do that. Because it's a really, really important part, both from a personal recovery and a personal resilience perspective. Yeah.
Can I jump, because Donna will remember this, but after the arena, I thought I was absolutely fine. And it was about 2 months after, wasn't it? We were at a meeting, and you were saying, you know, and I kind of just, it all started to come out, and I wasn't right. And I think you can't expect to carry on doing now what you were doing 3 months ago. And if you do try and keep doing that, you will end up being ill, and that's not a place you want anybody to be. So and having been there and come out the other side, as I think I kind of am, if you don't get it right now, it will come back and bite you, you know. So don't just say, oh, I'm fine, you know, 6 months down the line you suddenly find, because we've all had loads of personal issues to deal. And I've said a few times that from a policing perspective, as I say, Donna will know this, you know, if you've got a team member who is personally affected by a crisis, by an event, by an incident, you take them away, you take them out of it, and then the rest of the team will deal with it. Because we've all been experiencing this, you haven't had that ability to do that, because we've all been living it, and that makes it incredibly, you know, even more difficult to manage that. So you know, it's really important that people do get help, say, you know, actually I'm struggling. Because if we don't say it to people in charge, you know, bosses, whoever it is that we can say it to, then how are we ever going to change anything?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point, isn't it? And I don't think I'm trading any secrets here, man. You've said before, haven't you, that it was when that you put your hand up actually and said, I'm not fine with this, we need to talk about it and get some support. Other people in your team came forward and said exactly the same. And, you know, sometimes we do wait for the nod from our leaders, don't we, however right or wrong that is. You are all influential people, and you know, it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. We've got to ditch that kind of 1970s thinking that we've all been guilty of it in the past. And, you know, it's a mantra of Comms Unplugged, isn't it? You know, seek support, seek help, talk to people, don't struggle on your own with this stuff.
Well, that's actually vulnerable leadership, isn't it? You know, and it's important if people think, you know, their leaders are there kind of made of steel, impervious to everything, then they're going to feel like they have to be like that as well. And that's just not possible for any of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've got heart. We could go on for another hour with this, couldn't we? It's such a fascinating chat, and we've got such a wealth of experience and talent with you all on the panel. Should we do one more question, Sally, and then before we go to Joe?
Yeah, we've got one more. Time for one more.
Yeah.
Are you doing it or me?
Oh. I'm just having a, you know, I'm a bloke. I can't multitask.
You're just having a peruse.
Yeah, I'm just having a look through. Yeah, so we got Georgia Turner. Really tough to get leaders to take care about well-being at the moment, if they just want output and outcomes. How do we change that? Totally agree with that, Donna. It's not being prioritised, and you know, and maybe you know, probably Georgia. You know, you're probably feeling rough tonight because of just that. You know, I know that you're working really, really long hours. You're managing a team. You're being pulled all over the place. It's no surprise really that you've begun to feel rough after 3 months of this. So yeah, really good point. I suppose just final thoughts really from perhaps all four of you about how do we stay on top of, you know, these huge demands. It's not going away, huge expectations, you know, video calls all over the place, the day job still being expected to be done on top of a crisis. I don't know if you could give one top tip to all the participants tonight, what would it be? And perhaps Julie, start with you first if I can.
So I think in comms, more so now than ever, but always, we could all work 24/7 and never get it all done. And the reality is that whilst what we do is really, really important, if you don't take a step down and a step away, you won't be able to keep doing it. And your leaders won't be able to get anybody else in that knows that organisation like you do, that knows how to speak to your audiences like you do. So if they don't give you that time off, then actually the whole business suffers. And that is the pushback that we need to give, is actually, I'm prioritising these things that are the really important things. If there's something else I need to prioritise, you need to tell me, but you also tell me what I need to drop, and I will be having some time off. I'm in the 5+ Zoom calls a day category, and I have had about 3 days off since February, something like that. And actually, like a couple of weeks ago, it was like, I cannot keep doing this. And for the first time ever, I'm going to have a week off next week where I'm not going on holiday, and I will not be dialing in. I will not be looking at any emails, and I never do that. I'm always like, oh, I'll just call them for this and I'll just check on that. But if I don't do it, I won't be able to carry on. And actually, to be fair, I said that to, you know, council's leader, and I said that to my boss, and it was not an issue. It was like, yes, please, absolutely do step away. You just have.
Oh, I think that's so. Just
have confidence. They can't be else in do your job tomorrow, you know.
Absolutely, no, that's really wise words. Thanks, Julie. Donna, a final top tip for you to how on earth do you manage all of this?
No, I think the main thing being, it follows on from what Julie's saying. It's about prioritisation, and it's actually sometimes saying no. You're not actually going to do something, because if you can actually understand the benefits of, I'm not going to dial into that Zoom call because I'm going to need to have a conversation with you afterwards. So why don't we just have the conversation afterwards, as opposed to me wasting 2 hours of my time sitting on a meeting that I'm going to get nothing out of. So I think that that's the main thing, really. It's about managing people's expectations and ensuring that obviously you're giving a very good argument as to the reasons and your rationale behind what you're doing, what you're doing.
Yeah, really important. Thanks, Donna. Amanda, a top tip from you?
It's hard, really. You leave me to the end. I think the key in all this is about speaking up, and I think sometimes we are so busy doing what we do that we don't look at we don't look up and go, do you know what, I can say this with the evidence, like Donna and Julie said, knowing what what you can say, and being really honest. So it's not an easy space to be in, but if you don't own that space, you're gonna struggle. Nobody's indispensable. Organizations will carry on. What's most important in all this is that you carry on.
Yeah, really good point. Thank you, Amanda. Sally, any final thought before we move on to our final slot?
Yeah, okay. So we've got a few questions in there. One of our panel might pop in afterwards and maybe answer them. That'd be great. I think my final thought is just have a think. Is it you that's putting the pressure on yourself? Or is it someone else? Because actually quite often it's you, and you're quite often thinking, I've got to do that today because I've got this and this and this to do the next day. And actually I've had to have a word with myself quite a few times, because I do this a lot. There's a bit about managing your expectations of yourself as well as managing the expectations of others. And I think that's really important. That's about self-awareness, knowing your trigger points and your stress points, as Donna said, and just actually taking that step backwards, just to kind of actually look at the long view for a minute and just think, okay, let's sort this into the piles here, and make it easier for myself to see the wood for the trees.
Yeah, really good point. Thank you, Sally. So on that, I'm going to thank our panellists, Julie, Donna and Amanda. I'm not just saying this, but what a brilliant group of people we've had on the panel. And I genuinely feel like we're in safe hands with people like you in charge of our crisis comms. So thank you all for what you do. I'm now going to pass over to Sally for our final slot of the evening. Sally.
Thank you. Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce to you the lovely Jo Crossland. Jo is an unplugger from 2019. Where are you, Jo? Can you stick your video on? I can't see you. Yes, you're there. There he is. Hi, Jo. So Jo's an unplugger from 2019. He works for the Centre for Population Health in Glasgow, in Comms up there, and he's also an RSPB volunteer. Lives up in beautiful Scotland and has occasionally shown us the lovely view out of his window, where he's working from home. And so Jo is an enthusiast for ornithology and our lovely feathered friends. So he's going to run a lovely little session now, because we've commented a number of times on our WhatsApp groups how much more clearly we can hear the birds now that we don't have all the traffic noise and all the other noises that we generally hear. So Jo's going to take us through a little presentation to help educate us on our feathered friends, and then we've got a little bit of a quiz at the end, haven't we, Jo? We
certainly do. I feel like I should say, and now for something completely different.
And it really is.
So I think, Sally, you're going to share your screen and put up the slides.
I will.
I'll get busy with the fizzy on the bird song.
Yeah,
right.
Okay. So let me just get rid of that. Okay, slideshow.
I'm loving the slide. It's so cool. Okie dokie. So yeah, as Sally says, we're all noticing birdsong and wildlife a bit more in general. And since lockdown, I don't know if anyone else has seen all the different wildlife encounters that people have been having across the globe, from the mountain goats exploring Llandudno to the civet in India turning up, an endangered cat-like animal turning up in an Indian city. And so whether it's the reduced traffic volume or us spending more time outdoors on our kind of mandatory getting out once a day walks, many people have been noticing birdsong more clearly than ever before. So I've noticed when you go out into the field, it can be quite overwhelming when you're confronted with lots and lots of birdsong all at once to understand what you're listening to. So I'm going to give you a few tips that will help you pick out individual species and give you a greater understanding of what's around you. So I think most of us can identify some British birds by sight. So there's a slide here that Sally's going to share of a few birds. And I think most of us will be able to identify these species. I don't know if you want to put people put their answers in the chat and say what they think these birds are. Let's have a look at the chat. Does anyone recognise these birds?
I certainly know. Yeah, I probably know. Well, I do know all of them because I've seen this. I've seen the answers, so I won't take part.
Oh, well, there we go. Cats coming in. Robin redbreast. Yeah, blackbird, goldfinch, blue tit. Oh yes, very good, very good. So, Sally, do you want to reveal the answers? On the next slide, there we go. So we've got the great tit on the top left, goldfinch top right, blue tit in the middle, robin bottom left, and blackbird on the bottom right. So identifying by sight is one thing, but how are people feeling in terms of their confidence levels by identifying things by sound? I don't know if people are feeling confident about that or not. But I'm going to put Sally and Darren on the spot now, and I'm going to ask them to identify some birds by sound. So let's go for the first one. Shout out your answers if you recognise this bird.
Darren, you need to come off mute and I'll go on video. You're in this with me.
Let's see if I can get this working. Any second now. Come on.
Cuckoo.
Very good, very good. Just like the clock. All right, next one.
You're up, Darren.
What was that?
It's a pelican.
Close, close. That was an owl, and it's a tawny owl, and it actually the male goes whoo, and the female goes twit. So if you hear twit twoo, that's actually two birds calling to each other.
It's a conversation. That's lovely.
The male is trying to woo the female.
Excellent.
And it's a bit rude that she calls him a twit, but there we are. And then last one, what's this?
Ducks.
Ducks.
Yes, yeah, that's a mallard. I always think they sound like they're laughing at you. Like whack, 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 whack. So, right, let's go on to the next slide. And here are a few kind of common birds, and we're going to go through them. So we're going to start with the great tit, which is the bottom middle. And the thing that is useful for remembering what a great tit sounds like is it sounds like it's saying teacher, teacher. So listen out for this. Got that?
I'm making notes.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, that will be useful for the quiz shortly. And then the next one I'm going to go is top left, the wood pigeon. And if you were watching Spring Watch in the last few weeks, someone came up with a brilliant way of remembering this, and it sounds like it's saying, I know I'm boring. I know I'm boring. So have a listen to this. Any second now. Come on, gremlins. So it kind of does sound like it's saying, I know I'm boring. And then now we're going to go on to the blackbird, which is a very kind of mellow, lilting, but very kind of improvisational song. So there's not much repetition. It's kind of like free-form jazz. So let's have a listen to the blackbird. So the blackbird is one of the last things you'll hear at night, and one of the first things you'll hear in the morning. It's like the Beatles sang blackbirds singing in the dead of night. They're quite late to bed and early risers. And you always see them at the top of a tree. So if you hear that kind of noise, look high, and they might be on your television aerial or on the top of a tree nearby. Right, so we're going to go to the house sparrow now, which is bottom right. And if you've ever walked past a hedge and it's singing like a bird or cheeping like a bird, like a pet shop, that's the house sparrow. Always makes me think of a pet shop. So cheep, 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 cheep. And this time of year, quite often we'll see them in gutters of houses, sitting in the gutter and cheeping to each other. Right, so next one, I'm going to go for the robin, which is bottom left. And this is a bird that sings all year round, but it changes its song. So in the summer, or in kind of post-Christmas up to the spring and summer, it has this really strong, vigorous song. And then when it comes to the autumn and winter, it kind of goes wistful and a bit sad. So I'm going to play you this now. A second now. Any second now. I've got a slightly different recording here as well. Very strong and vigorous song.
It's such a tiny bird as well.
Yeah, a lot of power in those vocal cords. If birds have vocal cords, I don't know. Again, they'll be sitting in the top of a tree singing their hearts out, trying to defend their territory. So those are kind of 5 common birds that you'll find in towns and cities in the countryside and parks. And now I'm going to go to some kind of specialist warblers. So Sally, if you want to go to the next slide. And as the name suggests, the warblers are very good at singing, but as you can see, they all look pretty similar. And the interesting thing about the warblers is that if you see them in the field, it's really difficult to identify them. So you actually need to hear them sing in order to ID them. So let's start with the chiff-chaff, and this is easy because it sings its own name. So that's the chiff-chaff. This is, now we're going to go to the wood warbler. This is my favourite. Imagine you're in a wood and you come across a broken down ruin of civilization, and there's a big marble slab, and you're in this wood and you get a pound coin out of your pocket and you spin the pound coin on this marble surface, and this is the call of the wood warbler. A second now. Come on, wood warbler, do your thing. Here it comes. I think that's amazing.
So cool.
You can totally imagine that pound coin spinning on that marble surface.
It sort of speeds up, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Now the willow warbler. This, I think, sounds like a bird falling down a well. It kind of goes low to high. It's kind of go. So let's have a listen to that. There should be a splosh at the end. And I wonder what you think the grasshopper warbler sounds like. Isn't that cool? The reason, the way you can tell that it's a grasshopper warbler and not a grasshopper is that it's going to be up in a tree. But yeah, that's the grasshopper warbler. Now, Sally will reveal the slide in a second, but I wonder if people can have a think about what makes this noise. Any thoughts? Anyone putting anything in the chat?
There is some chat in there. I can't see it on my screen at the moment.
Oh, here we go. Woodpecker. Yes, that was a great spotted woodpecker, and they can tell the difference between a male and a female because the male has a little red patch at the back of his head, which I've put on the slide there, and they don't sing at all. So they will mark out their territory by hammering into wood, and sometimes I've heard about them going up telegraph poles and hammering on metal plates on the telegraph pole because it sounds louder, so it'll travel further, so they can mark out a bigger territory. So we're going to go to a quiz now. And
Will I stop sharing that then, Joe?
You can go on to the next slide. Just to say,
oh yes.
Let's quiz. Right. So now we can do the 5-question quiz.
I'm going to have to come out of this so I can do the poll. Or am I? No, I can launch the poll from here. Okay.
Cool. So I will go with bird number 1. What do people think this is? Any second now. I'm sorry about this. There we go. Here he comes. So that's teacher, teacher. Answers in a minute. So bird number 2. Here we come. Freeform jazz. And bird number 3. Okay. And bird number 4. Not boring at all. And bird number 5, final one. Okay, and that's the end of the poll. So the couple of things I wanted to mention while the poll results are coming in is that the RSPB have got a really great tool for IDing birds. So if you have seen a bird and you're not sure what it is, you can Google RSPB bird ID, and then you can fill out things on a form. So the size of the bird, the colour, where you saw it, and it will give you lots of options with pictures, and then you can hopefully ID the bird that you're looking for. On a similar note, if you want to know more about birds, a bird in particular, the RSPB is a brilliant place to look. So you can Google RSPB and then grasshopper warbler or great tit, and you'll get loads of facts and figures about the bird, where to see them. You can listen to the bird call and get loads of information. And then the final thing I was going to recommend is there's loads and loads of resources and people to follow on Twitter. So Springwatch is a brilliant Twitter account. They've got loads of resources, always sharing really interesting and fascinating wildlife stuff. RSPB, their Twitter account's great. And the Wildlife Trusts are really good and worth a follow. And the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, WWT, they're brilliant as well. And they've got reserves around the country, and they've got Twitter accounts for each of those reserves. And lots of the nature reserves will have their own Twitter account as well. So once you start plugging into them, you'll start learning more and tapping into new networks and meeting other like-minded people as well. And it's a really, really friendly community of lots of people willing to share pictures and knowledge, and you can learn so much more from other people through those social media channels. So should we have a look at the poll results?
Okay, so I'm going to end the polling and I'm going to share the results, and let's see how everybody did. So you want to talk us through that, Joe?
Okay, so yeah, so congratulations to everyone who said great tit. That was the answer. That was the one that went teacher, teacher, teacher. So now moving on to number 2, it was a bit more difficult. That was the blackbird. So congratulations to everyone who got blackbird. It's very kind of lilting and changing all the time, and very mellow, and just a beautiful song to listen to. And then the third one, oh, look at that, 96% wood warbler. That's the spinning coin on the marble surface. So well done if you got that. And then bird number 4 was the wood pigeon. Not boring at all, even though it says it's boring, it's not. So 85% there, very good, well done. And then the last one was the chiff chaff, which says chiff chaff, chiff chaff, chiff chaff. And it does sound a little bit like a great tit. But so I put that in a sneaky one, but only caught 7% of you out there. So well done if you got chiff chaff, because that was the answer. So what I'm going to do after this, I'm going to share some resources on Twitter, so you can have a listen to those birds again in your own time and have a look and figure out more information about them through the RSPB. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions, then fire away.
Yeah, you're a superstar. That was so good. Really enjoyed that. Lots of love coming in for you from our participants as well. So yeah, quick question from Emma Rogers. What's your favourite bird song, Joe?
Ooh, well, there's lots of really good ones, like the wood warbler, the spinning coin on the marble surface. It's always really exciting where you hear a raptor call. So you hear things like pew, pew, and you look up and there's a distant speck in the sky of a raptor circling like a buzzard or something. So that's always exciting. But I'm always delighted to hear when there's a little phrase to learn a new bird, because quite often the bird books are really academic and they're like, it will make a zip zip sound. And you're like, well, what's that? So the yellowhammer, it's a beautiful little farmland yellow bird, and they've got a little phrase for it that says it sounds like a little bit of bread and no cheese, which is brilliant. So things like that, and if you can make up your own as well, you know. So it doesn't have to be I know I'm boring. It could be I hate this lockdown, or whatever you want it to be. You just make it fit. So whatever works for you is the most important thing. Whatever makes you remember it.
Fantastic. Question from Gavin. Which bird song would you most like to hear but haven't managed yet?
Ooh. Well, I'm learning all the time, so I'm not an expert at all, and I am always really pleased to learn new things, and it does take a long time. You know, you have to kind of work at it, but I'm always happy to learn new things. So there's probably isn't anything that I know about that I haven't heard, but that's not to say I know them all. I only know a decent handful, but I'm always happy to learn new stuff. So there's not one in particular, and I'm not one of these people who goes chasing over the country looking for birds. Not you can during lockdown anyway, but you get these reports of a strange bird flying into Shetland, and then all these birders flock
literally
and tick it off their list. And that completely astonishes me because I've no interest in that at all. I'm very, very happy to go out for a walk in the countryside and see a wren or, you know, a blue tit or, you know, whatever. And if it just happens along, you know, in the course of a normal day, then I'm happy. But I'm not going to go make a special trip just to see this bird that might or might not be there.
I've just seen in the chat that Jill is reminding us at Comms Unplugged last year, we saw the firecrests, which are teeny tiny little birds, aren't they? We went on a bird walk with an RSPB expert guy, or Birds of Poole Harbour, and it was just amazing to see them all, little tiny birds, and I would never have known what that was or spotted that without.
I've seen a goldcrest before, but I've never seen a firecrest, so that was one for ticking off my virtual list.
That was special. Yeah, it was good.
They're beautiful.
So cool.
The UK's smallest bird. I think they don't they weigh something like the same as a 20p or something like that.
It's incredible, isn't it? That's amazing.
And they've got this cool, like, fiery Mohican.
Yeah.
The punks of the world.
Teeny tiny punks. Oh, thanks so much, Joe. That was fabulous. I think we've learned loads there, and we always learn a lot from you all the time on our WhatsApp groups. Anytime somebody hears a bird, they kind of record it on their phone and put it up and say, Joe, what's this? So he's our resident expert. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all your knowledge with us. It's been fantastic.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
And actually, Joe, just before you go, a couple of people just asking what your Twitter handle is so they can follow you.
Which is FOGGIEBEE.
Sorry, could you just repeat that, Joe? We just lost you for a little bit there.
It's at FoggyBee, which is FOGGIEBEE.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Joe, that was so much fun. Thank you for taking the time to prepare that for us. And we shall see you again soon. Fantastic.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So, Sal, it's the end of our webinar too. So we've got some people to thank, haven't we? First off, I'm going to thank you because you do so much hard work behind the scenes to make this happen. And then I just bowl up and just, you know, say a few words, but you've done all the hard work. So thank you for everything that you've done.
Oh, thank you.
Brilliant panel, to Donna, to Julian, to Amanda. That was genuinely fascinating. I felt like we could have gone on for another half an hour or so there.
Videos, ladies, please put your videos on again so that we can see you.
Here we go. But thank you to you three. And finally, thank you to Jenny. Jenny's still there. Really enjoyed your session and some really good top tips for things to do as we carry on with whatever comes next. But yeah, some really invaluable stuff there. So what a fun night. I know we've overrun on time a little bit, but it feels like it's been a really good session, and everybody's pretty much stuck with it as well. So fantastic. Thank you to all the participants who've taken part. A diary date for you all, 15th of July, will be our third and final of these webinars. And not to be revealed tonight, but Sally, I won't steal her thunder. Got some rather exciting news potentially about webinar 3. So 15th of July, do please get that in your diaries because you won't want to miss it. So that's enough from me. Just want to thank everybody, and thanks once more again to Joe. Go off and have fantastic evenings of what's left of them, and we'll see you all again on the 15th. Take care, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.